6 years ago. 6 years ago, my life took an unexpected turn when my family and I moved into a new neighborhood. My wife Becky, our daughter Holly, and I settled into a cozy house in what seemed like an idyllic community. We quickly befriended our neighbors Matt and Pam. Matt, a robust and charismatic real estate agent, had a way with stories that could captivate any audience, while Pam, a tall and elegant blonde, was the epitome of a devoted mother to their son Chet. As time passed, Becky and Pam grew close, often meeting up to chat over coffee or take long walks through the neighborhood. Meanwhile, Matt and I bonded over our shared love for golf, turning it into a monthly ritual. Our families intertwined effortlessly, sharing countless dinners, celebrations, and casual get-togethers. Despite the age gap, Matt and I connected through our love for golf, often engaging in friendly competitions. The camaraderie between Becky and Pam further solidified our bond, creating an extended family-like feeling. But beneath the surface of these seemingly ordinary moments, events were brewing that would soon challenge the very foundation of my marriage and disrupt our intertwined lives in ways I never imagined. One sunny afternoon, after another decent round of golf minus 18 holes, 7 strokes over par, I returned home, unaware that my world was about to be turned upside down. Becky greeted me with a look that sent chills down my spine. "We need to talk," she said, her voice trembling with an emotion I couldn't quite place. My mind raced, wondering if it was something trivial like a car issue or a more significant family matter. Holly, our 18-year-old daughter, had recently started dating a boy named Dean, and I briefly worried that it might involve her. Little did I know the conversation we were about to have would be the beginning of the end of the life I knew. "Henry, my dear, you know how much I love you, right?" Becky began, her voice soft and filled with a tenderness that only deepened my unease. "Of course, Beck. I never doubted it for a second," I replied, forcing a smile, though my heart pounded with the growing suspicion that something was terribly wrong. "And I do love you, Henry." "With all my heart," she continued, her tone sincere yet laced with a hidden sorrow. "I look forward to spending the rest of our lives together." "Me too, honey," I said, trying to keep the conversation light. "But what's on your mind?" Becky hesitated, her eyes avoiding mine as she seemed to gather the courage to say something I wasn't ready to hear. "Henry, we've been together for 20 years, 18 of them married. I love you more every day, and I've dedicated my life to you and Holly. Do you agree?" I nodded, unsure where this was heading but sensing that it wasn't about Holly, as I had initially feared. "Of course, Becky, you've always put Holly and me first." "Yes, and that's why I believe you'll support me now," she said, her voice tinged with hope. "I'm listening," I responded, my curiosity piqued but my stomach churning with dread. "Henry, as we age, our bodies, energy levels, and sex drive change. You've always been a wonderful lover, but as you get older, it's harder to keep up," she said, her voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of something more. I swallowed hard, feeling a knot form in my throat. The last thing any man wants is for his wife to question his masculinity, and I had a sinking feeling that this conversation was about to take a turn for the worse. "For me, it's different. I need closeness almost every day," Becky continued, her tone now slightly pleading. "Don't you think I feel the same way, Becky? I love you and want to care for you, but you can't completely fight biology," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm, despite the rising tension. "I know, and I don't blame you. It's just part of aging," she said, her voice softening. "Okay, Becky, you've pointed out my sexual shortcomings. Are you going to get to the point?" I asked, my patience wearing thin as my anxiety mounted. She took a deep breath, her voice trembling slightly as she finally confessed, "Henry, I have a lover. It's been almost a year now." I was stunned, my mind reeling as I struggled to process her words. She kept talking, filling the silence with explanations I could barely comprehend. "We meet a couple of times a week. I don't love him, Henry. I love only you. I tried to keep things normal at home. You always had me when you wanted, and that won't change. You're my husband, and your needs come first," she said, her voice desperate for understanding. "So you intend to continue this?" I asked, my voice shaking with suppressed anger. "Yes, Henry. My needs have increased, and I need this. But it won't change how I feel about you or our lovemaking," she replied, her voice firm. "Who is he?" I demanded, my voice rising. I'm not telling you. It's not one of your friends or colleagues, just someone I met, she answered, her voice flat. And you expect me to accept this because I love you, I said, disbelief coloring my words. Yes, I know you love me and want me to be happy. I've tried hard to make sure you didn't notice any changes. The alternative would be a divorce, alimony, and child support, she said, her voice now calm and calculated. I tried to stay calm, but inside I was furious. How dare she threaten me with divorce? Holly might not be happy living with a cheating mother. You've got it all figured out, haven't you? You deceived me and now expect me to accept it, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Please don't see it that way, honey, she pleaded. Don't call me that, I snapped. Being angry and using obscene language won't help, she said, her voice admonishing. It may not, but it makes me feel better, I retorted, barely able to contain my rage. She continued to explain her twisted logic, comparing her affair to volunteering in her free time, as if it were some harmless hobby. Okay, let's assume I believe you, which I don't. But why now, I asked, my voice tinged with suspicion. What do you mean, she asked, confused. You managed to lie and deceive me for a year. Why tell me now, I demanded, needing to understand her motive. I plan to show you how much I love you and how grateful I am for allowing this. But he's taking me to Hawaii for a week, Becky said, her voice calm but determined. Are you kidding me? You leave for a week with your lover while I work to support you, and I'm supposed to welcome you back? What did I do to deserve such disrespect, I retorted, my anger barely contained. You didn't do anything, Henry. This isn't disrespectful to you. I need you to understand that I'm doing this for myself and it doesn't change how I feel about you, she replied, her tone pleading for understanding. I was at a loss for words, the weight of her betrayal pressing down on me like a crushing wave. How had my life spiraled into this nightmare? And what about Holly? What will you tell her about your solo vacation, I asked, trying to grasp the full extent of the situation. I already told Holly that some friends and I are taking a trip, and it won't affect our family vacation this summer. She didn't mind and might even be glad I'm going, Becky explained almost cheerfully, her detachment from reality astounding. I was incredulous. Oh, this is such a light-hearted topic, and you think I'll let her believe this lie? What proof do you have otherwise, Henry, she challenged, her confidence unwavering. She'd rather believe me than you. Her arrogance was infuriating. So you can do whatever you want, and my opinion doesn't matter. If I don't like it, too bad. How do you expect to stay married to me after this, I demanded, feeling the weight of her betrayal. We love each other, Henry. Everything will go back to normal once I return, Becky insisted, her voice soothing but unconvincing. I'm tired of this nonsense, I said, my patience exhausted. Even if we stay married, which we won't if you go, things won't be the same, I added, trying to make one last plea. Becky, don't go. We can work on our marriage and make things better. Just please don't go. Henry, I'm going. But everything will be as before, you'll see. I love you too much to let this change anything, she replied, her resolve unshaken. My heart sank as I realized there was no reasoning with her. The marriage I had cherished for 2 decades was crumbling before my eyes, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Fine, Becky. You've done your duty by telling me. Have a good time. Unlike you, I won't lie. I'll be in the carpentry shop if you care, I said, my voice heavy with resignation. Henry, be careful. Operating power tools while upset is dangerous, she cautioned, her concern seeming hollow after all that had been said. I walked to the basement, ignoring her, my mind racing with thoughts of what to do next. Divorce seemed inevitable, but I wouldn't let her have the satisfaction of knowing she had destroyed me. Hours passed as I worked in the workshop, trying to drown out the noise of my thoughts. Eventually, I heard Holly come home, her voice filtering down from upstairs. It was a crisp autumn morning, and the sunlight filtered through the orange and gold leaves outside, casting a warm glow in the room. The day was special not only because Holly was coming over for dinner, but because it marked the anniversary of the day I proposed to Michelle. As I stood in the kitchen, preparing the evening's meal, memories of the last few years played out in my mind like scenes from a film. After that tumultuous period in my life, Things had finally settled into a comfortable rhythm. Michelle and I had built a life filled with love, trust, and the kind of peace I once thought I'd never find again. Our home was a lively one, with Johnny, now a spirited teenager, Amelia, who was just starting kindergarten, and little Tamara, whose boundless energy kept us all on our toes. And soon, we'd be welcoming another little girl into the family. The thought of it brought a smile to my face. I was grateful for every moment, every challenge, and every bit of joy this new chapter had brought me. As I set the table, I heard the door open. Michelle walked in, her smile brightening the room. "Something smells delicious," she said, giving me a kiss on the cheek. She was glowing, her pregnancy suiting her perfectly. "Holly should be here soon," I replied, returning her smile. "I'm really looking forward to tonight." "So am I," Michelle said, her eyes filled with warmth. "It's been a while since we've all been together. Holly's been so busy with her new job and wedding plans." "She's grown into such a remarkable woman," I said, pride swelling in my chest. "I never imagined we'd come this far." Michelle placed her hand on mine. "You've been an amazing father, Henry. Holly's lucky to have you." "She's lucky to have you too," I said, squeezing her hand gently. "You've done so much for her, for all of us." Before Michelle could respond, there was a knock at the door. "That must be Holly," she said, moving to open it. Sure enough, Holly stood there, her face lit up with a smile that melted away any lingering shadows from the past. She had changed so much since those dark days, more mature, more self-assured. She stepped inside and embraced Michelle first, then me. "Hi, Dad." "Hi, Michelle," she said, her voice filled with genuine happiness. "Sorry I'm a bit late. Traffic was awful." "No worries, sweetie," I replied, hugging her back. "We're just glad you're here." As we sat down for dinner, the conversation flowed easily, filled with laughter and light-hearted stories. Holly shared updates on her wedding plans, excitedly discussing the details of the upcoming event. The wedding was set to take place in a beautiful garden, surrounded by family and friends. Michelle had been helping her with the arrangements, and it was clear that the two of them had developed a close bond over the years. After dinner, as we lingered over dessert, Holly grew quiet for a moment. She looked at me, her expression serious. "Dad, there's something I've been meaning to talk to you about." I felt a slight twinge of worry, but I kept my tone light. "What's on your mind?" She took a deep breath, then smiled. "I just wanted to say how grateful I am for everything you've done for me. I know I haven't always made it easy, especially after everything that happened with Mom. But you never gave up on me, and I don't think I've ever really thanked you for that." Her words hit me hard, in a good way. For so long I'd wondered if Holly would ever truly understand the pain we both had gone through. But here she was, sitting across from me, expressing a level of gratitude and maturity that made every struggle worth it. "You don't need to thank me, Holly," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I'm your father. I'll always be here for you, no matter what." Holly's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I know, Dad, and I want you to know that I've learned so much from you, about love, about strength, and about forgiveness. You've set such an example for me, especially with how you and Michelle have built your lives together. I'm so lucky to have you both." Michelle reached over and squeezed Holly's hand, her own eyes misty. "We're lucky to have you too, Holly. Watching you grow into the person you are today has been such a privilege." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything we'd been through settling around us like a comfortable blanket. The scars of the past were still there, but they had faded with time, replaced by the strength of the family we had become. Later, after Holly had left and the kids were asleep, Michelle and I sat on the couch, wrapped in each other's arms. The house was quiet, the only sound the soft ticking of the clock in the hallway. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Sometimes," Michelle replied, resting her head on my shoulder. "But I try not to dwell on it. We've built something beautiful here, Henry, and I wouldn't trade it for anything." I kissed the top of her head, feeling an overwhelming sense of peace. Neither would I. As we sat there, content in the silence, I realized that this was what happiness felt like. Not the absence of pain, but the ability to move past it, to find joy in the present and hope for the future. Life hadn't turned out the way I had expected, but as I looked at Michelle, felt the life growing inside her, and thought about the family we had created together, I knew that I wouldn't change a single thing. The past was behind us, and the future stretched out before us like a promise of love, of family, and of a life well lived. And as I drifted off to sleep that night, holding Michelle close, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, just as we always had. The winter months had arrived, and with them came the excitement and anticipation of the upcoming holidays. Our house was bustling with activity. Christmas decorations were being hung, and the scent of freshly baked cookies filled the air. But this year, the holiday season held even more significance, as we were just days away from welcoming our newest family member. Michelle was now in her final days of pregnancy, and the glow that had accompanied her throughout had only deepened. As I watched her move gracefully around the house, tending to the girls and putting the finishing touches on the nursery, I couldn't help but marvel at her strength and resilience. She was the cornerstone of our family, and every day I found myself falling more in love with her. One snowy afternoon, as the girls played outside in the freshly fallen snow, Michelle and I sat by the fireplace, enjoying the warmth and the quiet moment together. We had been discussing baby names for weeks, and the debate had finally come down to two favorites, Lily and Grace. "I still can't decide," Michelle said, her hand resting on her round belly. "They're both so beautiful." I smiled, leaning in to kiss her forehead. "How about we wait until we see her? Maybe when we finally meet her, the right name will just feel right." Michelle nodded, her eyes twinkling with excitement. "I like that idea. It'll be our little surprise." As we sat there, savoring the peaceful moment, the door burst open and the girls came rushing in, their cheeks flushed from the cold. "Daddy. Mommy. Come see our snowman," Johnny called out, her voice bubbling with excitement. Amelia and Tamara were right behind her, their tiny voices echoing through the house. Michelle and I exchanged a look of pure joy before getting up to join them. We bundled up in our coats and boots, stepping out into the winter wonderland that our yard had become. The snowman was an impressive sight, with a carrot nose, coal eyes, and a scarf that had once belonged to me. "You girls did an amazing job," I said, crouching down to admire their handiwork. Tamara beamed, her little face glowing with pride. "His name is Frosty, like the song." "Frosty it is," Michelle said, laughing softly. She winced slightly, placing a hand on her belly. I noticed immediately concern flashing across my face. "Are you okay, honey?" Michelle nodded, though her expression had changed. I think it might be time." My heart skipped a beat, and the world seemed to stand still for a moment. "Are you sure?" She nodded again, more certain this time. "Yes, Henry, it's time." Everything happened in a blur after that. I quickly ushered the girls inside, calling Holly to let her know we needed her to come over right away. Within minutes, Holly arrived, her own excitement mirroring ours. She assured us she would take care of the girls and everything at home, allowing us to focus on what lay ahead. The drive to the hospital felt both surreal and all too real. Michelle and I held hands tightly, the anticipation building with every passing moment. By the time we arrived, the contractions had grown stronger, and I knew our baby girl was eager to meet us. Hours later, as the snow continued to fall softly outside, I found myself standing in the delivery room, holding my breath as our daughter was born. The world seemed to pause in that instant. The sound of her first cry filled the room, and a wave of indescribable emotion washed over me. "It's a girl," the doctor announced, smiling as he handed the tiny, squirming bundle to Michelle. Michelle cradled her gently, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Hello, my sweet girl," she whispered, her voice filled with love. "Welcome to the world." I leaned in, my heart swelling with pride and love as I gazed at our daughter. She was perfect, tiny fingers, soft tufts of hair, and eyes that were just beginning to take in the world around her. "She's beautiful," I murmured, kissing Michelle's forehead. "You both are." Michelle looked up at me, her eyes shining with happiness. I think she looks like a Grace." "Grace," I repeated, letting the name roll off my tongue. It was perfect. "Grace it is." As we sat there, overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of the moment, I knew that our lives had changed forever. Grace was the final piece of our family puzzle, and with her arrival, our hearts were fuller than ever before. The days that followed were a whirlwind of joy and adjustment. The girls were ecstatic to meet their new baby sister, each one eager to help in their own way. Johnny, ever the little mother, took on the role of protector, while Amelia and Tamara were fascinated by every little sound and movement Grace made. Holly visited often, her presence a comforting reminder of the journey we had all taken to get here. She and Michelle had formed a bond that was more than just family. They were friends, confidances, and kindred spirits. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, our family complete, I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. The laughter of the children filled the room, and the warmth of the fire cast a soft glow over everything. As I looked around the table, at the faces of the people I loved most in the world, I knew that this was what I had always been searching for. The road had been long and fraught with challenges, but it had led me here, to this moment, surrounded by love and light. After dinner, as the girls helped Michelle with the dishes, I stepped outside for a moment, the cold air bracing against my skin. I looked up at the night sky, the stars twinkling above, and felt a deep sense of gratitude for everything I had. Just then, the door creaked open and Holly stepped out to join me. She wrapped her arms around herself, the cold not deterring her from standing beside me. "It's beautiful out here," she said softly, her breath visible in the chilly air. "It is," I agreed, looking down at her. "How are you feeling about everything, Holly?" She smiled, her eyes reflecting the warmth of the lights from inside. "I'm happy, Dad, happier than I've been in a long time. And I'm so glad you found this, that we found this." I nodded, knowing exactly what she meant. "It's been a journey, hasn't it?" "It has," she said, leaning her head on my shoulder. "But it was worth it. Every step." We stood there in silence for a moment, the snow crunching under our feet, the weight of the past finally lifting away. "I'm proud of you, Holly," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You've come so far, and I'm so grateful that we found our way back to each other." She looked up at me, her eyes shimmering with tears. "I'm proud of you too, Dad. You never gave up on us, even when things were at their worst, and because of that we're here now, together." I pulled her into a hug, holding her close as the snow continued to fall around us. The bond between us, once strained and broken, was now stronger than ever. As we walked back inside, the warmth of the house enveloping us, I knew that we had all come full circle. The past, with all its pain and heartache, had led us to a place of healing and hope. And in that moment, I knew that the future was bright, filled with the promise of new beginnings and endless possibilities. And as I looked at my family, Michelle holding Grace, the girls playing together, Holly smiling at me, I knew that this was the life I had always dreamed of. A life filled with love, laughter, and the unwavering belief that no matter what challenges we faced, we would face them together, as a family. The year passed in the blink of an eye, filled with milestones and memories that would last a lifetime. Grace's first year was a whirlwind of firsts, first smiles, first steps, first words. She quickly became the heart of our home, her laughter infectious, her presence a constant reminder of the love that bound us all together. Johnny had taken on her role as the big sister with pride, guiding her younger siblings with patience and care. Amelia and Tamara were inseparable, often found playing together in their imaginary worlds, their giggles echoing through the house. And Grace, with her wide-eyed curiosity, followed them everywhere, her tiny feet padding softly across the floors as she tried to keep up with her older sisters. As the months rolled on, Michelle and I found ourselves more deeply in love than ever. The challenges we had faced together, the ups and downs, had only strengthened our bond. We cherished the quiet moments we stole together after the kids were asleep, often sitting on the porch, watching the stars and talking about our day. There was a sense of peace in our lives now, a peace that had been hard-earned and was all the sweeter because of it. One evening, as we sat together after putting the girls to bed, Michelle turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Henry, there's something I've been thinking about," she said softly. I looked at her, curious. "What's on your mind?" She hesitated for a moment, as if gathering her thoughts. "I've been thinking about everything we've been through, how far we've come, and I think it might be time to reach out to Becky. I know things between us have been strained, but she's still a part of our lives, and I think it's important for Grace and the girls to know their grandmother." Her words took me by surprise, but as I looked into her eyes, I saw the sincerity there. Michelle had always been the more compassionate one, always willing to see the best in people, even those who had hurt her. I nodded slowly, considering her suggestion. "You're right, it's been a long time, and I think it could be good for all of us." Michelle smiled, her hand finding mine. "We've built something beautiful here, Henry, and I want to keep that going, to keep bringing light into our lives, even if it means facing the shadows of the past." The decision to reach out to Becky was one that weighed heavily on my mind, but I knew it was the right thing to do. So with Michelle's encouragement, I picked up the phone the next day and called her. When Becky answered, there was a moment of awkward silence, neither of us quite sure how to start the conversation. "Henry," she finally said, her voice tinged with both surprise and a hint of warmth. "It's been a long time." "It has," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. "How have you been?" There was another pause, and I could hear her take a deep breath. "I've been okay. Life's different now, but I'm doing my best." "I'm glad to hear that," I said sincerely. "Listen, Becky, the reason I'm calling is because Michelle and I have been talking, and we thought it might be good for you to come by sometime, to see the girls. Grace is growing up so fast, and I think it's important that she knows you." I could hear the surprise in her voice as she responded, "I'd like that, Henry. I've missed them. And I've missed you." Her words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of all that had happened between us. But there was no going back, only forward. And that's what we both needed to focus on. "Let's start fresh," I suggested, trying to ease the tension. "We've all changed, and I think it's time we let the past be the past." "Yes," she agreed quietly. "It's time." We made plans for Becky to visit the following weekend, and as I hung up the phone, I felt a strange sense of closure wash over me. The past was still there, a part of who we were, but it no longer had the power to control us. We were moving forward, all of us, in our own ways. When the weekend arrived, the house was filled with a mix of excitement and nervous anticipation. The girls, especially Grace, were eager to meet their grandmother. Holly had spoken to Becky as well, helping to smooth the way for what could have been an awkward reunion. When Becky arrived, I could see the apprehension in her eyes, but I also saw something else: hope. She looked around the house, taking in the changes, the evidence of the life Michelle and I had built together. "Hello, Becky," Michelle greeted her warmly, offering her a hug. Becky hesitated for a moment before returning the embrace, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "It's good to see you, Michelle," Becky said, her voice sincere. "Thank you for inviting me." Michelle smiled. "We're all family, Becky. That's what's important." The day went better than I could have hoped. Becky was nervous at first, but as the hours passed, she began to relax, especially around the girls. Grace, with her natural curiosity and charm, quickly warmed up to her grandmother, and before long, they were playing together as if they had always known each other. It was a beautiful sight, one that filled me with a sense of peace. The past was still there, but it was no longer a barrier. It was simply a part of our story, one that had led us to this moment of healing and connection. As the sun began to set, and the day drew to a close, Becky prepared to leave. She hugged the girls tightly, promising to visit again soon. When she turned to me, there was a softness in her eyes that I hadn't seen in years. "Thank you, Henry," she said quietly, "for everything." I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. "Take care, Becky." She left with a smile, and as I watched her drive away, I knew that this was the beginning of something new. Not just for me, but for all of us. Later that evening, as Michelle and I sat on the porch, watching the stars as we often did, I felt a deep sense of contentment settle over me. "You did a good thing today," Henry, Michelle said, resting her head on my shoulder. "We did a good thing," I corrected, wrapping my arm around her. "I couldn't have done it without you." She smiled, her eyes reflecting the light of the stars above. "We're a team, you and I, and there's nothing we can't face together." As I looked out at the night sky, the future stretched out before us like an open road, filled with possibilities. We had come so far, and I knew that whatever lay ahead, we would face it with the same love and strength that had brought us this far. The past had shaped us, but it no longer defined us. We were moving forward together, building a life filled with love, hope, and the promise of all that was yet to come. 2 years had passed since that day Becky first visited, and life had taken on a rhythm that was both comforting and filled with the unexpected joys of family life. Grace was now a lively toddler, full of curiosity and mischief, keeping us all on our toes. Johnny had blossomed into a responsible young woman, helping with her younger sisters and excelling in school. Amelia and Tamara were inseparable as always, their bond deepening with each passing day. And then there was Lily, the newest addition to our family, born a year after Grace. She was a serene baby, often content to observe her sisters with wide, curious eyes. Watching the girls interact, I couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Each of them brought something unique to our family, and I loved them all fiercely. Holly, now married, had moved into her own home with her husband, but she visited often. She and Michelle had grown even closer, sharing not just the joys of motherhood but also the struggles that came with it. Holly had taken to her new role as a stepmother with Grace, nurturing her stepdaughter as if she were her own. The bond between them was a testament to Holly's growth and the strength of her character. Becky had become a regular part of our lives again, visiting often and making an effort to rebuild the relationships that had been strained for so long. She had found peace in her own way, and though our paths had diverged, we had found a way to coexist, bound by the love we both had for our children and grandchildren. One Saturday morning, the house was a hive of activity. The girls were playing in the living room, their laughter filling the air as they built towers with their blocks and played dress-up. Michelle was in the kitchen, preparing breakfast while I sat at the table, sipping my coffee and enjoying the sight of my family. As I watched, the doorbell rang, and Michelle wiped her hands on a towel before answering it. A moment later, she returned with a surprised smile on her face. "Henry, you have a visitor," she said, her eyes twinkling with amusement. I looked up, puzzled, and was even more surprised when I saw who it was. Standing in the doorway, with a nervous smile on his face, was a man I hadn't seen in years, Jeff, Holly's biological father. For a moment, I was stunned, unsure of how to react. Jeff had been out of Holly's life for so long, and I hadn't expected to see him again, let alone at my doorstep. "Jeff," I said, getting up from my chair. "This is unexpected." He nodded, clearly uncomfortable. "I know, Henry. I wasn't sure if I should come, but I wanted to talk. If that's okay." I exchanged a quick glance with Michelle, who gave me an encouraging nod. "Of course." "Let's talk outside," I suggested, leading the way to the porch. As we stepped outside, the cool morning air greeted us, and I gestured for Jeff to sit on one of the chairs. I took a seat beside him, waiting for him to speak. For a moment, Jeff simply looked around, taking in the sight of the yard where Holly had played as a child. There was a sadness in his eyes that I hadn't seen before, a regret that seemed to weigh heavily on him. "Henry, I know I don't have the right to ask anything of you," he began, his voice rough with emotion. "I've made a lot of mistakes, and I've been absent for far too long. But I've been thinking about Holly, about everything I missed, and I want to make things right, if that's even possible." I listened, my emotions mixed. Part of me wanted to protect Holly from any more pain, to keep her safe from the man who had abandoned her. But another part of me recognized the sincerity in Jeff's voice, the genuine desire to make amends. "Holly's grown into an incredible woman," I said finally, my voice steady. "She's strong, compassionate, and she's built a good life for herself. I don't know if she needs you in her life, but I do know that forgiveness is a powerful thing. It's up to her though, Jeff. You'll have to ask her." Jeff nodded, his eyes downcast. "I know. I just want a chance to tell her that I'm sorry, that I regret every day I wasn't there for her." "I can't speak for Holly," I replied, my tone softening, "but I think she deserves to hear that from you. It's up to her how she responds, but at least she'll know you're sorry." Jeff looked at me, gratitude in his eyes. "Thank you, Henry. I didn't know what to expect, but I appreciate you giving me this chance." We sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of the past hanging between us. Then I stood up, extending a hand to him. "Come inside, Jeff. Have breakfast with us. Holly's not here, but she'll be over later. You can talk to her then." He looked surprised, but he accepted my hand, standing up with a tentative smile. "Thank you. I'd like that." As we walked back inside, I knew that this was another step in the journey of healing that we had all embarked on. Life had a way of bringing people back together, even when it seemed impossible, and I was willing to see where this new chapter would lead. The morning passed quickly, filled with the usual chaos of a house full of children. Jeff sat quietly at the table, observing the girls as they played, his eyes softening whenever Grace or Lily toddled over to him with a toy or a request to play. Michelle, ever the gracious hostess, made sure Jeff felt welcome, engaging him in conversation and making him feel at ease. As noon approached, Holly arrived, and I could see the surprise in her eyes when she saw Jeff sitting at the table. For a moment she froze, uncertainty flashing across her face. "Dad," she said quietly, her voice tinged with both surprise and a hint of caution. Jeff stood up, clearly nervous. "Holly, I'm sorry to just show up like this. I wanted to talk to you, if you're willing to listen." Holly looked at him for a long moment, and I could see the emotions warring within her. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, let's talk." They stepped outside, and I watched from the window as they sat on the porch, their voices low and filled with the weight of the years that had passed. I couldn't hear what was said, but I could see the tension in Holly's shoulders gradually ease as the conversation continued. When they came back inside, Holly's eyes were red, but there was a new resolve in her expression. She didn't say much, but I could tell that something had shifted between them. Jeff left shortly after, but before he did, he turned to me and Michelle. "Thank you, both of you. I don't know where this will go, but I'm grateful for the chance to try." After he left, Holly sat down with us, taking a deep breath. "I don't know what to make of all this," she admitted. "But I think it's a start. I'm not ready to forgive him yet, but maybe someday I will be." "Take your time," Michelle said gently, reaching out to squeeze Holly's hand. "There's no rush. You have to do what feels right for you." Holly nodded, her eyes reflecting a mix of emotions. "I will. Thank you for being here for me, for always being here." "Always," I said, smiling at her. "We're family, Holly? That's what matters." As the days turned into weeks, Jeff continued to reach out to Holly, slowly rebuilding a relationship that had been fractured for so long. It wasn't easy, and there were setbacks along the way, but Holly was strong, and she faced each challenge with the same grace and determination that had carried her through so much already. And through it all, our family continued to grow and thrive. The love we shared only deepened with time, and the bonds that had been tested and strained had emerged stronger than ever. One evening, as the sun set over the horizon, casting a warm glow across the yard, Michelle and I sat on the porch, watching the girls play. The future was still unknown, filled with both challenges and joys, but as long as we faced it together, I knew we could handle anything. "I love you," I said softly, turning to look at Michelle. She smiled, her eyes filled with love. "I love you too, Henry, more than words can say." And as I held her hand, the sounds of our children's laughter filling the air, I knew that this was everything I had ever wanted, and more. We had found our way through the darkness, and now we were standing in the light, together as a family.